Good afternoon and welcome back to Butler Mill Works. Today I'm going to work on a project that's been in the making for about 2 years. A good friend of mine, he's lent us welders, watched the dog, helped out on a bunch of different things. So it's about time that I get him his knife. So over the next couple of days I am going to make a handle for this knife that I found on the internet. It's just a regular steel blank that you can find pretty much anywhere. I'll put a link in the description where I found this one. Picked it up. It's been sitting in my shop for the last 2 years and I'm finally going to get my good friend a knife made. So hope you enjoy watching. Please hit that subscribe button. Please like us. Thanks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this knife blade here, kind of trace out where I want to put it on this piece of wood. Probably going to end up going up on this end here. Cut it off on the chop saw most likely. And then probably cut our piece down in thickness, because right now I would say it's about 2.5 inches thick, and the scales for the knife really only need to be maybe 3/8 of an inch to about a 1/2 inch thick at the most to start off with, and then I will shape them down by hand with just sandpaper and maybe a palm sander depending on how rough this wood is, but that's kind of the plan. One thing that I will do with this blade right now while I've got it out so that I don't damage anything, I'm just going to take some painter's tape and cover up the edge. It's fairly sharp, not razor sharp. When I'm done with this project, I will put a real nice edge on this blade with my stones, but for the time being I want to cover this up so that, one, I don't damage anything as I'm working, but two, so I don't cut myself, quite frankly. I'll put a couple of layers of tape on here to protect that blade and make sure I'm just covering the blade. I don't want to end up with any tape underneath the scales once I get those put on, and it just ends up being a lot of extra work to take that tape off from underneath the scales. Like I said, I'll just get a couple of layers on here. This is just one of the little steps that I take as I'm getting a blank ready for scales. This will also give me this additional tape. Will give me something to clamp to when I'm working with sanding the scales down. I obviously don't want to put the scales in the vise. I don't want to put just a raw blade in the vise. This thing has got a really nice finish on it to begin with, and again, I just don't want to have to do extra work later on to try to either buff those marks out or damage the knife. So I'll give this a couple more layers of tape and then I'll call that good, and I can get started here cutting this down and then cutting it in half for my scales and laying it out and doing some preliminary shaping before I get too far the project, epoxying the scales on or what have you. So again, this is just a quick little step. I would say that looks pretty good. Since I'm only making this one cut on the chop saw, I didn't think it was worth it to get the stand out. Yeah, that wood is just absolutely beautiful inside. I don't know if you guys can see that on the camera, but the grain, really tight grain in there. Just absolutely beautiful piece of wood. So now that I have my two scales cut, I need to figure out which side is going to be the best for what I'm trying to do here. So right now, given this big crack on this outside, I may cheat a little. Take a look at these two scales, and I think I can get what I need and avoid that big crack. Yeah, I think I like this how I've got it here. So I might just get rid of that scale. And do something that looks like this. Yeah, again, this grain is just, it's amazing. I think it's really going to come through beautifully once I get this sanded and finished. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to give this kind of just an easy outline, basic outline, so that I have a reference point for where I can go back to. And I will tape this down and drill some holes for the throng and just the pins to hold the two scales together. One quarter it is. Yeah, I think all three of them are about 1/4, so I will drill those out. Not on my bench, I'll find a piece of scrap. I got plenty of scrap laying around from all the other projects we've been working on. So this is pretty typical for how I'll drill these scales. I'll drill one of them first, and then I will tape the two scales together. In cutting these, how I did, it's pretty easy to get them matched up so that the grain is going to match up on the bottom of the scales. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but again, this is just going to be absolutely gorgeous grain that's going to show through when I finish this. I'll probably do a little sample first. I haven't worked with this wood before, but I think that I'll go with some Danish oil and see just what that does for me. I may use tung oil, we'll just have to see. I'll do some tests here. So that's what I need. I just need these to be pretty well held together so I don't have any movement, and I'll just drill all the way through now. And there we have it. Those holes should be aligned. I don't have too much tear out on the back side, but I left these about a ½ inch, so they will get a lot of sanding. Great. So now, I don't know if you guys can see, but I traced that outline, and I'll probably just take now a little handsaw and cut that out, and I'll cut it pretty wide so that I have some room to work with, and then do the same thing. I'll tape those two together, line up the holes, and that'll give me my 2 scales. Really, I just want to get these 2 pieces so that they are, the holes are aligned as I go to cut this template out. I'll go slow with this. I don't want to ruin anything. It's absolutely fine if the scales end up being just a little bit bigger or different sizes. That'll all get taken care of as I'm shaping. I think what I might do, this is a little awkward, so I think I might just trace one scale onto the other. Hopefully I can find a pencil that doesn't want to break every time. There you go, that might make things just a little bit easier. I haven't done one of these in a while, so I'm a little out of practice. But yeah, that should work a lot nicer now. Well, I have both the scales cut out now, and they're pretty rough, and I'm going to leave them that way. It'll be easy enough to sand them down. But the next thing that I need to do is I need to cut my pins, and my buddy wanted stainless, and I know that that's going to be a little bit harder to sand. So what I'm going to do is I'll take a measurement with my calipers. I'll get an idea of how thick this is. So it's looking like about 1.1 inches. And I think I'm going to cut the pins down to about maybe 7/8 of an inch or so, just so that I don't have to sand this stainless too much. I will do the same thing for the thong. So the thong is right here. This is just a hollow tube of stainless steel that I will put in the back here. As you could put a leather strap on there for a little lanyard. And that's what I see most folks do with the thong tubes. So I'll get those cut. I'll sand them down. I'll bevel the edges, and I will get ready to glue up. Right now I am just measuring out my pin length, and also I'll measure out my thong tube for the knife handle. That'll need to get cleaned up with a file in just a moment, but while I still have the long piece in the vise, I'll file that also. I'll bevel the edge here, get rid of that little burr. I'll get a better file job on that a little bit later, But this knife only has 2 pins, which makes it easier for me, quite honestly. Get my second one marked out, get my second one cut. There we go. I'll clean this up before I put it away for the next time, just to save a little bit of time with the next knife I make. Get my throng tube. I'll be a little gentler on this one. I don't want to crush the tube. I'll measure 7/8 and we'll cut another one. This is a little more difficult to cut because it's just a hollow tube and I'm getting caught on the inside diameter. So just go slow. Cut-off wheel on the grinder might be an easier tool to use for this, but this will work. There we go. I'll clean this up. I'll probably just put it in the vise here. I'm going to flatten this the best that I can. And then I'll just give it a nice little bevel all the way around. The bevel will help as I'm trying to install this. I think that looks great. Get the other one into the vise. Again, I'm just flattening and giving a good bevel, just a little bevel. It is windy out there today. I think this is going to be our last nice day for the foreseeable future. More snow is in the forecast. I am kind of done with winter. I'm ready to be outside more often. Working at the property, running the sawmill, but take what you get. And I'll clean this throng up also. Again, I don't want to clamp too hard on there. It's just a hollow piece. Not the most consistent tube in terms of thickness, but I'll try to clean that up with a jeweler's file. Cleaned up pretty nicely. Excellent. So one other thing that I do like to do with these pins is I like to cut grooves in them just to give the adhesive some place to penetrate into. I feel that it gives me a little bit more holding power with my pins in that adhesive. It's literally all I'm doing is I'm just taking the hacksaw, running a couple passes back and forth to create little ridges in this pin, which will allow the epoxy someplace to go. And just, like I said, I feel that it provides me a better glue up. And I'm just going, they're not deep grooves, but I'm just doing maybe 3 or 4 in 3 different places along this pin. I don't know how well. Yeah, you guys just can't see that very well. There we go. So as you can see, just a couple of grooves all the way around. I'll do that with both pins. I'm going to leave the throng as it is. I don't want to cut too deep into the throng and cut through that wall. I don't remember what the wall thickness on that is, but not terribly thick, and I would hate to go through and fill the throng hole with epoxy. So that should be plenty. I may end up filling this throng tube with wax during the glue up so that I don't end up with epoxy on the interior of it inadvertently. That wax I'll just be able to drill through really easily. I'd be able to go through the epoxy pretty easy as well. I just want to give myself the best chance of success here. So I'm just doing a dry fit here to see how well my pins align. I need to grab a punch. So far so good. Let's see if these line up. I do need to be a little gentle. I noticed that I've got a slight crack in this scale. I just don't want to break it and have to glue it back together. There we go. Honestly, that's going to be a really nice fit with those pins. I think I might go ahead and glue this up, allow the epoxy to cure overnight, and then I'll do another shape on this. I don't think I want to cut these scales down any further yet. I'll just let the epoxy do its job. The pins, they could probably be a little bit longer, but that just gives me a lot of room to sand down as we go through. I might clean those up a little bit more so that there's not marks in there before glue up, but things look great. What I've got here is just some 15-minute epoxy. It is a 1-to-1 ratio, so I'll mix up way more than what I need, and I will get this knife put together. I'll clamp it down. I'll let it dry overnight. I'll probably bring it inside. We've been getting pretty cold at night. It's a 1-to-1 mix. I'll do my best measuring. It doesn't have to be exact. Part A. Part B. So a little known fact about me. I spent 6 years of my life working in a glue factory, where one of the big things we were making was 2-part epoxy, just like this. So I am very used to these smells. We were always making glue, sending it all over the world. It was a job, that's for sure. And about 5 years ago, I made the decision to go back to school, get a master's degree in education. I have been teaching for a little over 10 years now, and I really, really enjoy it. It was a good move on my part to go back to school, but working in the glue factory taught me a lot about glue. So this 2-part epoxy, pretty simple stuff. We were making much more in-depth materials that, like I said, got shipped all over the world for electronics, medical devices. It was a potting compound, or some of the products we made were potting compounds. So I'll just mix this up, give it about another 30 seconds or so. Make sure the part A and part B are well integrated, and get this knife glued up. Really excited here. Taking the time to make this for my buddy. That looks like it should be good. Let's see here. What do I want to glue this up on? I'll just use this piece of wood. I'll just throw some packing tape on top of it. I don't want the knife to stick to the wood as it's drying up. Excellent. So what I will do here, I'll get a little bit of epoxy on this side. Let me just make sure I'm not doing anything silly here. Another dry fit. Okay. Probably should have marked those inside outside a little while ago, but it just slipped my mind. So a little bit of epoxy on the inside here. Make sure a bunch gets down into the holes. I'm okay with a lot of squeeze out on this put together. Squeeze out is actually going to help me to fill things in a little bit better. The most important thing is good coverage on this scale. I'm gonna grab some gloves. This is about to get messy. Alright, I'm back. Got some gloves on. Get some more epoxy here on this pin. Push it in. I don't want to go all the way in. I'll use the punch to get these pins exactly where I want them. Again, I'm going to town here. Squeeze out is A-okay with me. Okay. I don't know if you guys can actually see that, but I did stuff some wax into the strong tube. And my hope is it'll just make things a little bit easier to drill out later. I don't want a bunch of epoxy in the interior of that throng tube, but I haven't tried that before. We'll see how it works out. Get my pins lined up. Awesome. That's exactly what I want. I want some squeeze out on that blade. This is definitely overkill, but I'd rather have too much glue and have to clean that up later than not have enough. Let's see if I can get this to fit. The throng is giving me a little bit of trouble. But it seems like I can get it to go home. Fantastic. So now I'll just work from the other side with the punch. Try to center these pins the best I can. And get that throng in. Seems like that throng's giving me a hard time. Doesn't want to go home. Slightly larger punch. I would say that those are pretty well centered. I'll just grab my calipers. What do I have? About 158, 177, 177, 202. 177. I'll push this one back just a little bit. 2. 173. It looks like I just went the other way, so they're about within 30 thousandths. I'm not that worried about it. I will fill these with epoxy. I fill this crack with epoxy. all gonna get sanded down later. I just really, really do not want this to crack, especially at this point. Honestly, quite surprised at how much checking there was in this wood. It was very dry when I got it, and we are in a very dry environment, so I don't think it had a chance to gain too much moisture. Starting to harden up already. Excellent. This is looking good. Take this little garbage baggie, clamp it home. I don't know why, but whenever I clamp up knives like this, it reminds me of Star Wars. I don't even know why it reminds me of Star Wars or what those things are called, but that's what I got going on, it seems like. So anyways, I'm going to let this dry overnight, and we will come back to this either tomorrow or the next day, whenever I get some free time. So thanks for watching.